playing no games. Haters hate, I'ma burn them in the flames. I fall, it's like LeBron James. Public enemy door, that's how we bang. Fuck the rumors, you niggas is all lame. Lollapalooza, me and my gang. You haters was pushing another gang. Y'all just pinky on the brain. All you suckers can take this in vain. My Lambo outside, that's purple rain. Your boy is a legend, I'll leave a stain. You could call me crazy, Dr. Strange. Public enemy is coming through. Public enemy is coming through. Public enemy is coming through. This one goes out to you and you and you. Public enemy is coming through. Public enemy is coming through. Public enemy is coming through. This one goes out to you and you and you. Hey yo, Chuck, it's been a minute, man. I'm ready. Yo, get that shit, Chuck.
You don't stop. See, we never drop the hip when we hop. I got 99% and the trick ain't one. Moves we weighs a ton, so we never really had to run. Coming through, it's time to put it on ya. Protest here, riot going on ya. Put the check for the air.
We are now about 16 months into what has been from day one a concerted and intense targeting of Black Americans, specifically by this president and by this administration. On his first full day in office, he proclaims war on diversity efforts, not only in government, but in any institution in the country over which he can exert leverage, everything from schools and universities to law firms to private businesses of every stripe. He then immediately started firing some of the highest profile Black public officials in the whole US government, seemingly regardless of any other thing about them. I mean, right away, we get the firing of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Charles C.Q. Brown. We get the firing of the Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden. And then it's Gwynne Wilcox from the National Labor Relations Board. And then it's Robert Primus, the chair of the Surface Transportation Board. And then it's Alvin Brown from the NTSB. And then it's Peggy Carr, the head of the National Center for Education Statistics. And then it's Willie Phillips from FERC, from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And then it's Lisa Cook from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, and on and on and on. When Trump and his top political donor, Elon Musk, then started just lopping off huge swaths of the federal government to disastrous practical effect, the largest and most egregious cuts targeted federal agencies that employed a disproportionate number of Black employees. Reporter Erica Green wrote about this a few months ago for The Times, noting that nothing had moved backwards in the federal government for Black Americans this quickly or this far in over 100 years. Since Woodrow Wilson came in 1912 and resegregated the federal workforce. Quote, Black employees were fired or demoted to lower level jobs, relegated to separate and inferior lunchrooms and other facilities, and accused of making white women feel unsafe. Those who remained were humiliated. A Black worker in the Postal Service was surrounded by screens so white workers would not have to look at him. Another employee had a cage built around him to separate him from his white counterparts. A clerk in the Treasury Secretary's office was assigned to rewrite all correspondence to address Black employees by their first names, the way Trump addressed the Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden, by her first name when he crowed publicly about firing her for no reason.
Well, there you have it, and those folks continue to support him and support his policies. How is that even possible, right? I mean, Rachel Maddow breaks it down. D.L. Hughley's been breaking it down, and it's only been facts. and everybody else is going off of oh, the Democrats haven't done anything for you, and the Republicans freed the slaves and stuff like that. It's like, what in the world? What alternate universe are people living in? It's just unbelievable. It's unreal. It is Friday, and yes, happy swag hoodie day. RNG is rocking. Grambling State University proudly accept the Asian request for Black people to stop coming into their store. Its boycott challenge is in full effect, he says. Yeah, how about that? How about that? Stop coming into our store. Stop opening stores in our neighborhoods then. How about that? How about you just don't open stores in our neighborhoods? Hmm, couldn't do that, right? Nah. But of course, then it's up to Black folks to stop patronizing. It's as simple as that. And the guarding of that store, and I was looking on RNG's feed, it's just pathetic. He showed video of it. It's just absolutely pathetic. Excuse me, and it's no laughing matter, but um, listen to how even a comedian talks about this.
Being from South Carolina, I guess I almost feel compelled to say something about this. Um, the store owner in Columbia, South Carolina, was found not guilty of taking the life of a 14-year-old boy. My only message right now is to my people. I ain't talking to nobody else. I'm talking to my people. Stop playing in your enemy face. And I'm not talking about color. I'm saying if you are not welcome, if you are not treated right, we have to change how we think. Because obviously there's a psychological issue going on in our community where we feel like we have to patronize places where we're being mistreated. This incident that happened with that young man is not the first incident that occurred in the community. I'm sorry, but we should have been left there. It shouldn't have to take for things to go this far. I saw a video of the store owner wrestling some girls. I heard somebody else had issues with this, that. Stop going there. If you cannot be treated right, I don't care how convenient the store is, how close it is, whatever. The only thing that you need from a gas station is gas. There is nothing of any nutritional value inside of a gas station. We don't need to go in there. Go where you are respected. This is why we have to understand our finances and get ourselves together so we can patronize ourselves, recycle our dollar, and don't have to subject ourselves to having to patronize people who don't care nothing about us, who don't have human decency and respect for us as just human beings. You don't like me, I ain't coming. One of the craziest things I ever heard somebody say, every time I come in this store, man, they tripping. What you going in there for? I ain't going in there. You're not getting my money. I'm sorry. I'm not giving my hard-earned money to you if you don't have human basic decency for me as a human being. I ain't got it for you. I ain't got it for you. You figure something else out, but I don't have that for you. Stop playing in your enemy face, man. If you don't like me, if you can't respect me as a human being, then we don't need to be nowhere around each other.
Not one lie detected. Not one lie detected. Why go there? We have to stop. You got to stop. You got to stop going there. It's as simple as that. And I know, as he pointed out, so the convenience, but as he said, there's nothing nutritional at a gas station of nutritional value. ONG says the local and state police are guarding that store like it's a national monument. Of course, if it was the other way around, would they? They'd have tore it down, right? They would have torn it down. Let's just be real. It wouldn't exist anymore. And of course, the store owner would have been convicted. Early this morning, and this is thus the whole idea of the Rachel Maddow playing that this morning. But early this morning, Senate Republicans rammed through their $70 billion bill to fund Trump's immigration crackdown through the remainder of his term. It was a 52-47 vote in the Senate this morning. And of course, it's going to rapidly move through the House. 70 billion. 70 billion for them to continue to have ICE arrest American citizens and try and deport American citizens, because that's what the majority of the operation has been. No one can tell you differently. And meanwhile, 70 billion, they can't find money for your health care. They can't find money for Medicaid, Social Security. When you think about this, when Joe Biden left office, gasoline on average, according to multiple surveys, was about $3.13 on average per gallon. Now it's $4.59, and if you're in California, it's like $8. Electricity averaged 17.5 cents per kilowatt per hour. It now averages 23 cents. Crude oil went from $70 under the former administration to $124 now. Heating oil has gone from $2.50 a gallon under the former administration to $5 a gallon now. Double. Food prices have increased. Beef that averaged about $5.50 per pound now costs about $8.50 a pound. Bread averaged $2 per loaf, now costs about $2.70 per loaf on average. And Senator Raphael Warnock said that the funding for ICE exceeded the entire budget of the United States Marine Corps. And now that they've approved the 70 billion, it's up to now 145 billion that they have earmarked and are spending toward ICE. And several surveys or research, including from Senator Warnock's office, show that $70 billion could fund universal pre-K for every 3 and 4-year-old child in the United States for 2 years. That same amount could provide free health care for 1.3 million children through September of 2028. It could also cover 2 years of community college tuition for 2.2 million students through September of 2029. That type of money could double Pell Grants for undergraduate students entering college. Warnock's office calculated that 70 billion could cover the annual grocery cost of approximately 11 million American households. They also calculated that funding could provide free school lunches for 22.7 million additional children through 2029 and deliver a year of SNAP to 31 million Americans. One analyst said the money could expand Medicaid coverage to 2.2 million additional Americans through September of 2029. It could extend the ACA premium tax credits, pay for all annual insulin expenditures in the United States 3 times over, and cover nearly one-third of the nation's medical debt. And it gets even more because another estimate suggests that the 70 billion that they are adding to ICE would cover 1 year rent for approximately 4.25 million Americans. That same funding could provide 40,000 in down payment assistance for every first-time home buyer this year. It could expand Section 8 housing assistance to 2.5 million more people through September of 2029. It could also fund efforts capable of ending homelessness for 8 years. You can end homelessness for 8 years. But no, it's for ICE. It's for ICE. Look at sip on that. We have a special guest at the top of the hour. We're going to talk about the assassination of Tupac and the coming trial and a documentary that our guests did on Tupac coming up in a few moments on Let It Be Known. Orange says, "Well, I am going to be petty. I'm calling ICE on those Asian and Arab stores located in black neighborhoods. That's not petty. It's your civic duty. That's your civic duty." Oh my gosh. And lest we forget Jeffrey Epstein. Um, Sarah Kellen. Have you heard of Sarah Kellen? Yeah. She is in the news. There she is. The longtime assistant to Epstein and an associate of the convicted sex trafficker, Ghislaine Maxwell. She's considering telling her story publicly through a book, documentary, or a television interview, she says. This is all according to page 6. Kellen, who worked for Epstein for 15 years and was identified as an unindicted co-conspirator in Epstein's 2007 Florida case, has never faced criminal charges. And according to page 6, they are told that Kellen possesses information that could shock the world, but she remains reluctant to disclose everything because she believes that particular knowledge could serve as protection if legal scrutiny ever intensifies. She's saying she's got the goods. She's got all the goods. And if she's with this guy for 15 years, Epstein, then you would think she does. Just like Ghislaine, or whatever you call her. Now, she's publicly described herself as a victim of Epstein's abuse and manipulation. She says she was groomed and controlled by him. Now, page 6 says that many people close to her believe is eventually going to tell her story, but she's fearing legal consequences. And then there's concerns about Mrs. Maxwell. So we will see how that unfolds. But it's so interesting to me because even the victims have been threatening to expose people, and it's kind of perplexing uh, to me. I mean, I don't really haven't really looked that deep into it, so maybe it's not as perplexing to others. But why they haven't? I mean, these people have been hurt so much. They're angry, and rightfully so. I have came across this I find interesting tidbit about Earth, Wind, and Fire. And maybe RNG or maybe even Southbound knows uh something about the song Reasons, that it's just not a you always think it's like a love song or something, right? But people have danced to it at weddings, anniversary parties, romantic celebrations. But according to members of the legendary group, many listeners, including myself, have misunderstood the song all along. A new documentary about the band is scheduled to premiere this month, and the surviving members are again explaining that Reasons was never intended to be a love song. Instead, that classic song, which was released in 1975, they say tells the story of a fleeting sexual encounter and the disappointment that follows once the fantasy fades. And then when you think about the lyrics, they describe a relationship built on desire rather than built on commitment. And so people are saying that they're surprised. And while I said I didn't realize that, I didn't know that, I'm not surprised. When you think about a lot of those songs that well, folks in my generation grew up on, um, you paid little attention when you were younger. And as you got a little more mature, oh, I mean, it took me till I was a teenager to understand me and Mrs. Jones. But the songwriters, Philip Bailey, Maurice White, Charles Stepney, they set out and did put forth what was really this warning about illusion and not everlasting love. So, it's really interesting. And we think about pop music and even RNG. I'm surprised. RNG says, "Wow, I never knew that." Okay, and then we have someone really upset about black pastors, black masons, the black politicians. They let us down and sold us out. They said they're it's Ramon Ramon Useful Esiful 1629 says there are more pyramids in China than in Egypt. The Chinese have no tourism of any of their own. Okay. But yeah, I didn't know that about Reasons. It's interesting. There's a lot of songs. You think of different songs and the hit songs from especially from the 70s and even beyond. Like my wife was telling me something about there's one song I really love, Solomon Burke, Cry to Me. Now she has I'm not going to repeat her theory on that song right now because I haven't really paid it a whole lot of attention, and it's not like she's only said it once. But the song "Cry to Me," she says, is not what I think it is either, and I love the song. It's a very simple song, got a nice beat to it, soulful. But there's a lot of songs that when you think about it, if you go back and take the time to look at the words and listen to the words, the lyrics, I guess you can figure it out. And Reasons, I never stopped to reason on Reasons. So Maurice White, I had the pleasure of interviewing Verdine before he died, and Maurice. And now I wish that I had this information when I did that interview. That's some great stuff. But like I said, many songs. I guess people of this newer generation, maybe they'll start realizing stuff like later on, like milkshake. She's not singing about drinking chocolate milkshakes or vanilla milkshakes at all. She's talking about something else that shakes. So maybe the kids don't realize that yet. I don't know. I don't know. But speaking of music, we have a special guest this morning. I am told that he is backstage and ready. He's and you know, we have been talking forever about the murder, the assassination of the great Tupac Shakur, and a lot of folks. It's always revisited when something else happens. We had Pop Smoke, and then even years ago, and the recently concluded trials of the people involved in the killing of Jam Master Jay. Snoop Dogg. Suge Knight's been in prison for a long time now. Again, and so when he comes up, because he does I haven't seen it recently, but he had been doing a podcast from prison, which is interesting to me. Um, well, it's really not that complicated as we probably envision. Is he would call in to whomever and they would put him on the air, but it was his podcast though, and I don't know if he still does it, but we know that a lot of people cast even suspicions toward him when it came to Tupac. There's been a lot of talk about Diddy, and we know Diddy's got enough troubles of his own right now. But our next guest really has all the goods when it comes to Keefe D and all and Diddy, Suge, and everything else. His name is R.J. Bond, and RJ has a documentary, and he has some great insight on this. Let's bring him on now. RJ Bond, thanks for joining. Let it be known.
Hey, brother, how you doing? Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. You've spent years investigating Tupac's murder, and as Dwayne Keefe D. Davis prepares for trial, I think it's in August. What is the
It
single
is.
biggest misconception, RJ, the public has about this case?
I think the biggest misconception that people have in the case is that there's actually any evidence. You know, uh, there's no
That's
gun,
something.
there's there's no car, there's no witnesses. And, should maybe a witness, but he's the one running around saying Tupac's alive, so that kind of throws that out the window, right? You know, and So I think that, when you hear grand jury indictment or you hear, somebody's been indicted and arrested and they're going to go through the process of getting prosecuted, I think the presumption is that there's actually something to prosecute him with other than what he said. And I love your bottom chyron down there, which says, give me the electric chair for all my future crimes. Okay. If a man, and this is what really got me involved with it, the cover up, Tupac cover up, which is on Tubi, actually, and Amazon, a bunch of places, but where I got involved, and the reason that even came about was because I got mad about the fact that they basically, for whatever reason he did it, wrote a book claiming that he was, had some, involvement
Uh-oh. Did we lose you, RJ?
with the shooting. Tell you that in the literary world, if you will, there's actually a name that I heard not more than a few days ago, a term, and the term is called autofiction. And I said, well, what is that? Had to ask an author friend of mine, what does that mean? And what she said was it's a fictional autobiography. So somebody actually goes to write an autobiography, but 90% of it's crap. 90% of it's all made up. And when you look at even like Trump or you look at the Art of the Deal or whatever, I mean, how much of that's really true? How much of that did he really do that? Did he part the Red Sea? What claims can you make, right? And so where we're at, and again, what motivated me was that you're actually going to prosecute somebody for something he said in the absence of any other evidence. You're taking somebody, and I mean, you see it in Europe all the time now. You see the cops showing up at the door for some you wrote on Facebook. They're showing up
Right.
at your door now.
Rap
And
lyrics.
that's real.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's real. The guys, the prosecutors that tried to get those guys down in Georgia convicted, for saying that they killed somebody in a rap song.
Right.
You can imagine what Pac would have been thrown. Hit him up if they applied that same standard, you know.
Now,
Um,
RJ, I'm sorry. Give us a little of
yeah,
your background and how you came to be involved in putting this together, this
sure,
docuseries.
sure. Well, first and foremost, I was introduced to the world of Pac through Frank Alexander, who was not only a close friend of mine, his godfather to my son. Frank Alexander was Tupac's bodyguard the night that he was killed and a witness to the shooting. And Frank and I met under completely non-Tupac circumstances where we just hooked up, had a mutual friend, and we just got along like clockwork, and we were best of friends. Like I said, he's godfather of my kid. We were friends for 10 years before Frank approached the idea. He had done Before I Wake and he'd Got Your Back. He'd done a couple of books and DVD before he approached me about working with him on another project. And I had done other films, not documentaries, but like, ghost stories and things like that, other movies.
Mhm.
And but he said, you're the guy who's pretty good at movies. Let's put it together. And that's really kind of where I got baptized into the world of Pac, into the world of the shooting. I never met Tupac. I wished I would have. I would have loved to have met him. But through Frank's eyes, I got exposed to all of that. And then it was kind of uh, I joke about this all the time. I said, every time I get done with a movie, I've been doing it 19 years was the first movie I did. And I've done probably 8 of them now at this point, docuseries, all that. And every
Mhm.
time I do a book or every time I do a movie, I say, okay, that's it. I'm done. That's all there is to say about it. I feel like I've turned over every corner of the bed to look for the bugs, and then no more bugs. And then 2 years later, I'm back in it again. Okay. It's like that
Yeah.
old saying, just when I think I'm
Every
out, they
time,
pull me
yep,
back in
yep,
again.
they pull me back in.
Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
and you talked about the lack of a smoking gun here in the Keefe D trial,
Yeah.
and you've reviewed the Las Vegas police department's files. You reviewed witness statements. You reviewed grand jury testimony. What else have you found that surprised you most about this case?
That KVD was dumb enough to say half the crap that he said. I think that was my biggest surprise that a man could actually be his own worst enemy in such a way. And it's funny because we actually in Cover Up, and it's funny because KVD's family, when we released Cover Up September 2024, because the trial was supposed to happen that November, so we wanted to get it out before the trial. But when the movie dropped and we got contacted by Keefe D's family and they were saying, thank you, thank you, thank you for, this, that, and the other. And I said, well, I don't know what you're thanking me for. We weren't particularly kind to Keefe D in this documentary. We
Mhm.
basically say he's his own worst enemy. He's a liar. And we even show an example where he makes up this complete story in an interview about being with Suge and Pac the night before the Tyson fight, where they all arrived in Vegas. And the interviewer had to correct him and say, well, actually, they came up Sunday morning. They weren't even there Saturday night. And the look on Keefe D's face was priceless. He did a kind of look when they called him out on it. It was just a complete made up fictional story.
Wow.
And so we look at it like, he's his own worst enemy. For whatever reason he decided to take up the mantle. And I think there's probably a couple of different motivations. Maybe at first there was some coercion involved to,
Yeah.
to back a narrative that was falling apart. And then the other one, threatening him with, drug conviction and all that. But when you even look at that, that's even kind of weird because here
Mhm.
KVD is, according to the story, he was caught red-handed with 10 gallons of PCP. Okay. Now that's enough for a small army. If you got that much in a jug, that's one of the big arrowhead bottles, it's a big 10 gallons like that. I
Right.
think aren't those big arrowhead bottle, the big, water bottle? I think 5 gallons.
Yep.
I think they're five. So that would be two of those, right? And you
Mhm.
would think if you're going to get caught with that, you get busted, you're caught red-handed with it. That's a life sentence. He already had 2 strikes. That's a life
Right.
sentence
He's
already.
done.
Okay, he's done. You stick a fork in him, he's done. And but they traded that conviction or that potential conviction for the PCP in exchange for information over a case that wasn't even LAPD's to begin with.
Mhm.
It was Vegas case,
It was
and they didn't
Vegas.
tell
Yeah.
Vegas anything about it. And it makes you wonder, well, if you got, and I imagine there was a lot of DEA guys, a lot of feds that were kind of hacked off about it because you work all that time, you get an airtight case against the guy, and then suddenly you got this other cop wheeling and dealing for a state confession or something about a story about a 20-year-old murder. I always say DEA guys, FBI guys, they're not motivated by what happened 20 years ago trying to solve an unsolved crime. They want to catch the bad guy right now because that gets them bonuses, that gets them productivity, attaboys, that gives them all that, accolades, and that helps them in their career. That's what they're interested in. They're not trying to solve a 30-year-old murder.
Right.
And
And
so, so good.
yeah, I was going to say your work also challenges theories that Diddy financed or orchestrated Tupac's murder. What evidence convinced you that those claims don't withstand scrutiny?
Well, even in light of that Diddy documentary that came out, there's no evidence. I mean, there isn't. I mean, I think again, it's about what you say. If you say I don't like this guy and I'll give $1 million to whoever go get him, and you put this bounty out like you're the emperor, and you put this bounty out on this guy's head. I Even if that were true, even if that somebody could say yes, we were in the room and we heard it, and this, and here's it, we put it in writing and we wrote it in blood and it's all there, and there's no question about anybody's mind that this bounty exists. Even if that were the case, saying a thing and acting on a thing are two completely different things. you know
Right, right.
I could sit there and look at it and say, oh, it would be easy to rob this place, but then if I go rob the place, now that's a whole different thing. I could talk about it all day. So I think that the actual lack of evidence, and not for trying, because they tried to get Zip, who was supposed to give the gun to KVD and tie Puffy into it. All of that was uh, there was nothing there. They didn't get anything from it. So, and like you said very wisely earlier, before our segment, you were saying that Diddy's got enough problems right now. I'm not saying he's a class act. I'm not saying
Right.
he's model citizen. And I'm not saying anything like that. But I will say that it's a far stretch or a far cry between, again, that thought that we don't like them, so anybody that wants to go get them.
Right.
Um, and actually doing it. So I think that's the thing. It's the lack of evidence that
Yeah,
would
I read also, RJ, I saw it somewhere. I believe that you had said members of, oh God,
oh, bless
excuse
you.
me, members of KPD's defense team have consulted with you without discussing any privileged conversations. RJ, what information do you possess that makes defense attorneys interested in you in your research?
That's a great question. And I always clear the air up front about everything. Number one, I am not being paid
Oh, I think he's
a
frozen up.
dime by the
There you
defense.
go.
You have to think about. No, okay, there you go. I say, but you have to think about it in terms of basically expediency. An attorney gets a client like KVD, you have a 30-year backlog of information. Okay, forget what just Vegas gives to you, but what about everything else? What about the witnesses Vegas never talked to? These
Mhm.
things, they all matter. Facts matter, but there is so much, just such a volume of that. My job is kind of like I'm like one of those river guides where I show you where the rocks are in the river and you kind of navigate around them. This is
Right.
going nowhere, or this is something you might want to think about. And it's just based on the work that I've done over the years, and it's kind of second nature to me. And I look at it like, if you got to get good at something really fast, if you have to get good at, like, let's say you're Keanu Reeves and you got to do the Matrix and you got to learn how to shoot a gun crazy sideways, okay, or Boys in the Hood, and you got to learn how to shoot a gun sideways and make it look good. You go to somebody who does it all the time and is good at it, and then you say, okay, show me how to do this. I don't have time to learn it myself. Show
Right.
me, how to do it. And so that's been kind of my fortunate role in this different attorneys that he's had, is they'll fire off a question to me like, hey, wait a minute, what does this make sense? Or then they'll bounce some ideas about things, and I'm like, no, we talked about that. This doesn't go anywhere. But since you're talking about a trial that's 67 days away, you would need multiple attorneys, private investigators, staffs of clerks, just to get through the paperwork by itself. So the fact that I can help out in that way, I just feel like my role is to just keep the data organized, just to keep it to where it's got context. Because anything in a vacuum like that, like the Diddy thing, anything in a vacuum may have some weight, but if you put it up against something, gives it context, then suddenly it has a different meaning.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I've been involved, and I'm glad to do it.
Yeah, and if this case actually does go to trial, which is apparently it looks like it will on August the 10th, what do you expect, RJ, that the public will learn for the first time that could dramatically change how people view the murder?
They're not going to learn anything new, as far as I'm concerned. They're not going to learn anything new. when to get the indictment against KVD, they took his book and literally read his book on the stand into the record. They read it into the record, and that's the best they got. He said it. So if you've heard the story and you know what the story is, and you know what the story's been for the last 25 years, Orlando Anderson, with the car and the gun and that, and
Mhm.
you hear the white Cadillac. Well, there were actually witnesses that said it was a white Lincoln. Okay.
Mm,
There's even confusion between witnesses on what the car was.
right.
So not only did they not find the car, they're not even sure what model the car was. They think it's a Cadillac. Everybody kind of thinks it is, but when you start using group consensus as evidence, like, well, everybody who thinks it's a Cadillac, raise your hand, and everybody, 20 people raise their hand, one guy don't.
Well,
Right?
it's
How many
like
people think it was a Lincoln?
yeah, it's like even when a police officer or detective gets a confession, they still look for evidence to support that confession. And so, like, as you said, in Keefe D's case, they read his book, but there's no evidence to support. I mean, you could say anything you want, right?
Right?
And make any
Yeah,
statements you want.
absolutely. And that's the thing. And they're like, and of course, his interviews on YouTube and other things that he's done, they consider that what's called hearsay, which is basically it's an out of court statement that you make, but the court will allow that statement to come in if it's against your interest. So if you say a statement that's against self-interest, like I say, I'm a diabetic and I don't take my insulin. Okay, that's a
Mhm.
statement against self-interest. You're not making yourself look very good when you say these things. Or I beat my wife, and how many times I beat my wife every day. That is a statement against self-interest, and they will allow that to come in. So KVD saying that he was involved in some crime, that is a form of evidence, but it's called hearsay evidence, and they bring that in. Now, when you usually have a confession, if that's what they wanted to call it, a guy confesses and he says, I cut the head off the dog and it's in my backyard. And then he takes them to where the dog is in the backyard. And now they have the body, now they have the evidence. And his confession was backed by, only he would know that. Okay.
Mhm.
I don't think there's anything in this whole Orlando Anderson story that's been going on for 30 years that anybody doesn't know. And, I'll tell you one thing too. Um, a book that's written by Keefe D called Compton Street Legend. Okay. That was actually also written by another author called Yusuf Jah. Okay. It was two guys that a book together. Having myself written a book with another person, I can tell you firsthand, it is very murky to try to figure out exactly who said what in the book. So,
Mhm.
for example, in that Compton Street Legend, they're quoting Charles Dickens.
Mm.
They're quoting Winston Churchill. I promise you, QVD has no idea who Winston Churchill is or ever was. Okay, no idea. So, and clearly, so that would be something maybe that the author put in there. Do you know that they only talked to the author last week?
Oh, wow.
Now,
Just
you
last week.
took a book just last week, first time they went to his house and asked him questions like, well, how much of the book did you write? And how much of the book did Kiwi write? Wait a minute. Wait, stop the presses. You're talking about you arrested the guy 3 years ago based on reading his book, and they asked you in the grand jury, did you, once you found out he had a book, did you follow up on it? Did you check it out? Oh, yes, we did. But then how do you do that if you never interviewed the other author of the book? How? So these are the kind of things, and the only reason I can speak to it is because it's out of court. In other words, it's not evidence. When they showed up with their cards, business cards, and they gave it to the author, and that the author's free to tell anybody who wants to, hey, by the way, they stopped by my house today. Oh, really?
Uh,
And okay, so that's, and I think that kind of says a lot about where their strength of the case is. I mean, if you're only
mhm.
asking, the book was written 8 years ago. Okay. If you're only asking 8 years ago, for 8 years, you haven't said a word about it. There was a co-author to the book, and you're not sure what statement is directly attributable to KVD versus what the author wrote. And then again, like I talked about that auto fiction, where they can just make random stuff up. We don't know. And the story
Mm.
about, I think even that story that KVD told about the night before the fight, I think that's even in the book. Okay. This
Oh.
completely made up nonsense. So
Wow.
if that's going to be your case, if that's your whole case, that's a problem.
Right. Right. It's a major problem.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and we're running out of time real quick. So let me just throw these in right quick. RJ, after all these years of research, do you believe we truly know um, who killed Tupac? I mean, is there someone that should be, in your view anyway, someone you believe investigators should have scrutinized more closely, but they haven't?
Yeah. I absolutely do. Um, you have to understand that the entire case they're building is based on what we call a revenge motive, where somebody did somebody wrong and they got a gun and went back and they went to Club 662 with a single gun when there was 28 armed guys there, and thought that was a good idea, right? According to the story. So when you have that revenge motive or whatever the revenge narrative is, okay, if you're willing to believe that, and it's this whole thing about a Foot Locker and a fight at a mall, and then they came to Vegas, and then there was the fight, and then there was the shooting, and there's this whole giant line of things you got to follow. You got to kind of figure it
Mm-hmm.
all out. It's a multi-part thing. If I told you very simply, take Tupac out of the car for a minute, and what do you have? You've got an attempted murder of one of the most powerful music industry executives at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
It'd be like somebody trying to shoot Barry Gordy or somebody trying to shoot somebody else.
Right.
And you take that out. Now, once you take a Pac out of the equation for a minute, you say, okay, who would be ballsy enough to do that? Orlando Anderson? No, he's not, because if Suge lived, then, clearly there would be revenge, that the whole thing would go. But when you look at it like that and you say, well, who do they usually investigate first when there's a high profile attempted murder? A crazy cop, okay, crazy, batshit crazy cop. This fool called 911 on himself, okay? He had a gun. He was wandering around in the front driveway of the house where he was living with the woman he was having an affair with. And he called 911 on himself, saying, if they don't get over here, I'm going to, I guess, kill myself or something. Police show up, they draw down on him. He files a harassment claim against the LAPD, gets Johnny Cochran to represent him, and gets a fat settlement from the city of Los Angeles. Okay. This is crazy. Kevin Gaines was the guy, if you follow the Biggie story, Kevin Gaines was kind of the start of the whole Rampart thing because he got killed by another cop, Frank Liga.
Mhm.
For why? Because he was waving a gun at him and threatening to shoot him. I'm going to kill you. And he's waving his gun out the window of the car. And of course, Frank Liga wasn't playing that. So he just, unloaded and dealt with the situation right there. He died being an aggressive guy, crazy guy. So if you say, well, okay, if you're willing to believe the whole Orlando Anderson, he got beat up, and so he went and shot at him. Well, what do you say about a guy that Suge Knight may or may not have taken out to the middle of the desert, stripped naked, beat him up in a van because he was dating his, estranged wife at the time? Don't you consider
Mm.
that guy might have some motive to want to get rid of him? And we can prove one thing, that Keefe D, they still haven't been able to prove Keefe D was in Las Vegas. We can
Right.
prove Kevin Gaines was in Las Vegas. We have documents showing he was in Las Vegas at that time. So,
Mm.
that's why the way I look at it, and I use Kevin Gaines as kind of a point, a narrative point to say, if you're going to believe something, you need to question everything.
Right.
And that's what I always tell people: question everything, question everything. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
How can folks watch Tupac Cover Up?
Mhm. Tupac Cover Up is on Tubi, it's on Amazon, it's on Zumo. I think there's even a couple of YouTube channels that they call them fast channels where you can
Mhm.
watch it and stream it for free. It's all over the place. I think we just celebrated, I think the number's right. We just celebrated 26 million watch minutes.
Wow, that's awesome. Wow. Well,
That's a lot of eyeballs. Well, it's actually me. I actually watched it a minute 26 million times just to, to have that done. But
RJ Bond, during the trial of Keefe D, perhaps we can get you to come back at the start, in between, or
Ooh,
afterwards. That would be fantastic.
yeah, yeah,
Something
we'll give
is
you
not
updates.
right. Tupac to Cover Up. RJ Bond, thanks for joining. Let it be known. We really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Have a
sir.
great one.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Absolutely. Folks, we headed to game 2 of the NBA Finals tonight. Tonight. Uh, and listen, game 1 was absolutely extraordinary. Of course, I'm going to say it was extraordinary, right? But the finals are off to exactly the kind of start the league could have only hoped. A dramatic comeback again by the New York Knicks, who won 12 straight playoff games, including, I think, 6 in a row on the road. You had the superstar taking over in the fourth quarter, Jalen Brunson. Celebrities filling the arena, including a lot of Knicks fans, all the way out in San Antonio. In the Knicks 105-95 game 1 win, you're looking at scenes from the city of New York. And the Knicks were out of town, but the Garden was packed for a watch party. Outside the Garden is watch party. Hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers in the streets of New York at watch parties. It may have even reached high up into the six figures that was out at watch parties the other night, and probably more of the same tonight. Um, After Jalen Brunson dropped 30 points, 13 in the fourth quarter, shook off 2 injury scares, including one that led him back to the locker room, and he led the Knicks back from a 14-point third quarter deficit. And the Knicks are 3 wins away from their first NBA title in over 53 years. And I tell you what, Jalen Brunson looks every bit like the superstar that Becky, don't know what she's talking about, Hammond, um, claims that he was not. Her exact words, and they keep, Stephanie Fetchit and others continue to try and mince the words that she says. Oh, she's only pointing out facts that small guys. That's not what she said. She said the Knicks don't have a dude. She doesn't have. He said they don't. And Jalen Brunson is not a dude. She said he's not the. She. I guess she's more of a dude than Jalen. But that's what she said. And this dude has led the Knicks to within 3 wins now. 3 wins. A couple of sweeps. Remember Moses Malone years ago, 1983, when asked about the Sixers going into the playoffs that year, he said, "Fo, fo, fo." He's like meaning sweeping everybody. They came very close to doing that. I think only one team extended the Sixers that year, won by a game. Um, but the Knicks are on the cuffs. If they win the next 3 games in a row, they will have done fo, fo, fo. They swept Philadelphia in 4, Cleveland in 4, and they're up 1-0 on San Antonio. We will see. And imagine, you see that's the size of a crowd for a parade. Imagine what that parade in the canyons of heroes, downtown New York will look like. RG said the Knicks and the fans are doing the most. They are. The fans are doing the most. They are traveling. I was absolutely stunned at the size of the Knick contingent out in San Antonio, all the way to Texas. But I had told somebody, listen, it's cheaper to go and get you a round trip plane ticket, a hotel, and a ticket to a game at the arena in San Antonio than it is just to go down the block to Madison Square Garden. And I think a lot of people saw that and they took advantage of it. But there is my beloved city right there. Start spreading the news, RNG. Start spreading the news. Game 2 tonight, 8:30 Eastern time, and then Monday, the Garden will be jam packed. And unfortunately, there will be a guest that most people don't want there. Some people don't care, and there are some people who want that guest there. He'll be traveling from Pennsylvania Avenue, and James Dolan can invite the president, but he won't invite Charles Oakley. I have a problem with that. Charles Oakley should be there. I know Charles Oakley is running his mouth. I know Charles Oakley has not done himself any favors, but Charles Oakley, they say once a Nick, always a Nick. Well, Charles Oakley is one of the toughest Knicks and one of the most important Knicks to ever put that uniform on. And irregardless of what happened in 2017, that shouldn't have happened. And that shouldn't have happened. And it was so disappointing to see folks that were in the arena, folks like Phil Jackson, who's a disgusting disappointment anyway, but and even to an extent, Doc Rivers, but who was in with the Celtics at the time that it happened, to watch and not take a stand at that moment to say, hey, wait a minute, you're not dragging Oakley out of this building like this. You're not doing this. They had the power to do it. And I think that's one of the things that aggravates Oakley about even Patrick Ewing. So it just needs to stop. This is, Oakley needs to pipe down. He needs to humble himself a little bit as well. But James Dolan needs to really humble himself, and Patrick Ewing needs to really suck it up. John Starks, you guys need to sit down. There was a meeting apparently years ago after this happened between Michael Jordan, the commissioner, James Dolan, and Charles Oakley to try and get this settled. And it went nowhere. And of course, the weakest commissioner in the history of sports, Adam Silver, says, "Oh well, now there's nothing I could do. I did all I could." He's a bum. Adam Silver is a bum. ONG says the new Knicks fans couldn't tell you. Right. 3 players from the 99 team, but they have Ewing jerseys on. Exactly. Exactly. Bandwagon jumpers is what you want to really call them, right? It's like, hey, go find somewhere else to jump, another bandwagon to jump on, because that's what you're going to do next year. So beat it. We don't need you. We don't need you. Oh gosh. Well, it is the weekend and watch party tonight. Game 3 on Monday. Looking forward to seeing how the Garden's going to look and feel. So, you guys, whatever you do this weekend, do it safe, have a lot of fun, and come back next week and we'll check you out. Take
Let's go! Let's go, Flav. Hey! Public Enemy.